Hi, everyone. I'm Mad Hildebrandt, and this is the Get Mad Show. Today, our guest is Amanda López Askin, who's running for re-election as County Clerk of Dona. Let's go. So welcome, Amanda, to the show. We're really happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and so one of the things, or actually, before we get into the interviews, the first thing that I want to do is ask you to take the minute right at the top of the show and make yourself human to the people and introduce yourself to them and who you are, not as a candidate, but as a person.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for having me on. Sometimes I feel painfully human, right? And fallible, which I definitely am. So my name is Amanda López Askin. I am a lifetime resident of Dona County. I'm actually sitting in my backyard right now in the North Valley, what we call the North Valley in my community. I have 5 rescue dogs, and I mentioned them first because they may bark. I have a husband. We've been married. It'll be 10 years this November, and I have a 4-year-old daughter. So while we've been, kind of social distancing, that's been my pack, so to speak, my 5 dogs, my daughter, and my husband. I have a especially close relationship with my mom, and she's about 4 miles away, so we've seen her during this time. I am product of Las Cruces public school system, and you won't find a bigger Aggie than me for sure. So happy to be here and to share kind of my thoughts on the campaign and what we have moving forward and how campaigning is probably a lot different. So I'm really grateful for this avenue to talk to the people of my community.
Well, we're really happy to have you here. And yes, I too have 2 dogs that are over there by the door. And this is close to the time the mailman likes to come. So if he comes to the door, we'll be hearing my dogs bark too.
And I actually did an interview with a meeting with the NEA group. And it was, I don't know if you have gnats, but we have gnats right here. And so I'm literally spent my entire time going like this to kind of shoo them away. So those things happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely, they do. One of the things that I'm doing at the very beginning of all of these interviews is that the reason you're at home, the reason I'm at home, actually I do all my shows from at home, but the reason that you're at home is because of COVID-19. And that's right on the top of everybody's minds right now, is COVID-19. And so while I'm not sure that that's something necessarily the county clerk does too much with, it is something that's impacting the constituency in your county and in your district. Sure. So if you could just talk about what you see is happening with COVID-19 for your district.
So in my position as the Dona County Clerk, it has affected me in terms of how I need to, as a leader, make sure the needs of our constituents are met while at the same time maximizing the ability to protect my staff in terms of their contact with the public has been continual as long as I've been there and in person. So can we do 2 things at once? Can we meet the needs of our constituents and meet our statutory requirements as well as keep the staff safe? And so, that has been a constant and everyday battle, I think. And I think we've been successful for the most part. We did have the majority of our staff working from home. Recently, our elections bureau had to return because we needed to, run a primary election. So there's that. In terms of being somebody who's born and raised here and feeling for the most part that I can take the temperature of a community. It's been very unfortunate that you're either one way or the other. And, and I would say 2 things can happen at once. I can be concerned about the business community. I can be concerned about, the rate of infection at the same time. It's not one or the other, right? And so I think that that's something that we don't talk about enough, because I know that people who want to continue with the lockdown or the quarantine are also concerned about the community. And I know people who are ready to get back to opening businesses are concerned about the infection rate. So I think there's not enough talking about that, the things that we have in common in terms of the similarities and the concerns that we have. And that's been an unfortunate us versus them, which really is threaded through a lot of things that I think most of us are battling through in terms of communication and relationships and politics, right?
Right. Yeah. And I guess that puts you in that position of where you are running an office full of people, and you know that you want to get them back to work, but at the same time you're wanting to keep them safe. And it isn't just one or the other. It isn't just open the doors and let them all come back in. And we do see those videos every now and again on TV or on the internet, where we're seeing particularly like those ones that we're seeing in Georgia and Florida, where people are just flocking out, and you're like, wait, you're going to a restaurant or to a bar or to the beach, and you have no mask.
Right.
And it's not you, it's that the mask isn't the protection just for you, it's for all those other people. And that's a level of selfishness that is just kind of an unusual thing to see, but now we're actually seeing it.
Right. And I think, having said that, that is where we get adversarial, and not you and I, obviously, I think we're on the same page, but it's like you either believe what some experts believe, or you're on board with somebody who thinks this, and that creates that us or them.
Yeah.
It has been deeply distressing to see a lot of the behaviors that people are so casually taking on in terms of crowding places, bars, restaurants. My husband and I have a conversation often. My poor 4-year-old daughter, who is super social and loves her friends, has been stuck with us for almost 3 months, right? Hunkering down. And we cannot recreate the play of a 4-year-old. We do our best. She has the dogs, but at the end of the day, like, we're not 4. And so we talk about, well, what does it look like for us moving forward in terms of where we're taking her? Are we going to take her back to her preschool? If we are, what is that going to look like? It's going to be June, July? Are we going to just wait until August? Does that mean for 5 months she's going to basically be, these are questions. Is it worth the risk if she goes in a smaller group in school and they're just with those kids? Like, there's all these things and decisions we have to make and we have to weigh. And I think everybody's dealing with that to some degree or another.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that, and I think that when we talk about political leaders and business leaders, those people are also in a unique position because they have to think about both of those things.
Right.
So I want to turn now, and I know it's kind of a quick switch, but I want to talk about one of the accomplishments and the things that you're interested in for your office, and again, because we're talking about responsibility to other citizens, and that is your responsibility that you feel towards the citizens and access to your office. So can you take a minute and talk about that?
Sure. So as a person who has a long background in mental health, community organizing, community outreach, one of the things that when I started this position, that I noticed and also knew that we had to expand on was our collectively in our office, that's every single person that answers a phone, that's me having these conversations in public, and along the way, is to talk about how accessible we are. And so when I say, this is your county clerk's office. And frankly, I kind of took that from our amazing and honorable Maggie Toulouse Oliver when she said, this is your Secretary of State's office. So this is kind of the micro version of that on a county level, which is, so this is your county clerk's office. We do things every day that affect people greatly, whether it is title companies that are waiting for us to research something and do something so the funding can be issued to their person who's waiting on the other end, right? To have their funds released for the home sale, right? Or if it's a record that we're keeping that they absolutely need to move something forward in their life, or things like the very important milestone of marriages. So all of those things are things we provide, but we are your county clerk's office. We are, our job is to serve your needs and to make sure that we have a high level of integrity when we carry out all of our responsibilities. And I mentioned recording and filing specifically in that area of our office, but only because that's not mentioned enough. We talk very often about elections because that's like the one that makes the headlines that I'm always asked about. I'm not necessarily people aren't necessarily asking about liens or titles, but we always also carry that very important responsibility of the business community. And that is why it's important that we be accessible and that people feel like our constituents feel like they have access to both areas of our office and get their needs met.
Right, and that's an important point, that because so many people forget about that the county clerks, that your office is not really just about elections, and that is what so many people think: elections, and then they also think marriage licenses a little bit more often because of some of those things that went on down in the South with the gay rights, and but they're also forgetting that there's such a link between the clerk's office and the business aspect.
Right. And I think that was underscored a few days after we closed our office to in-person services, right? We never have closed. I received at least 3 inquiries for whether it was real estate agents or title companies saying, please tell me that you're not going to stop doing X, Y, or Z, because if you do, that means we stop. If you stop doing that, then people aren't getting this done and this done, and there's a whole other portion of our community that's affected in a negative way. And so I needed to make sure that I could do what, to the best of my ability, that we could maximize the services that we could offer to those in specific areas as well, because they use us daily and they need us, and we want to serve them and serve them well.
Right, and even people who don't go anywhere near your office, that just never have a reason to go in. If they're buying a house, what they don't realize is that in order to find that the title is clean and clear and that there isn't a lien on it, they have to go to you. And
I talk about this. So I've been in this house a couple of years. My husband and I moved out to the country, so to speak. And the day that we bought the house, I remember we closed it early at like 7 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to come and clean the fridge in my new house because it was that bad. And I remember, this is before I was a clerk. I remember them processing the sale, and they basically said, we have to wait for the county clerk's office before you can get the keys. We have to wait before they can process these things. So I was affected, and I didn't understand that at the time, what that meant. And now I really, really understand that. So when people are waiting on things for us, I recognize that their lives are on hold often until we do the job that we need to do.
Right. And that is, just to keep that in mind. And so that when people are talking about who they're voting for, it's important for them to realize that they actually have an interest in who's being elected and who's running that office. And
right.
A part of that also comes down into voter outreach. And I know that is something that you're interested in. Here we're going to shift back to elections, which is, as you said, the sexy part of your job.
Right.
So let's talk about voter outreach, because it's not just that simple. It's not just the voter going out and doing it. It has to do with you as well.
Sure. So I was seeking an endorsement from a group a few weeks ago, and I had a Zoom meeting like this. And there was 5 gentlemen, very nice, a little bit older than me, and were asking me questions. And so, like I said, a great group of people, and I was honored to get their endorsement. But when we had the conversation about how can you, specifically me, connect with voters, and how can you engage? And I said, something you have to understand, with all due respect, you are 4 older white men. You've probably always voted. Your siblings have probably always voted. Your parents taught you to vote. They taught you the importance of voting. I'm not necessarily in a group, my demographics do not speak to somebody who would be a voter advocate and a lifelong voter. I just happen to have a mother who specifically was very engaged and interested and and being present and accounted for in terms of how her voice was heard. But if you look at my background, which was disadvantaged in a lot of different ways, I'm not your typical voter, right? And so I believe that because of my background, because of the way that I've seen not just myself, but also my community be marginalized in different ways and areas, right? Whether it's rural, whether it's impoverished, whether it's, racial disparities, whatever those are, categories, are, I in some level am connected to them. So when we talk about voter outreach, I think my experience and who I am, especially being deeply embedded in this community, will serve me well in doing voter outreach, because it's not just about getting people registered to vote. It's also hopefully engaging them in a way that makes them, encourages them to think about why it's important, what matters to them, whether it's the roads in their rural community that every time they flood, their mom can't go and, go to her job, whatever it is, right? Whether it's their access to healthcare and how we have such challenges in New Mexico connected to that. Is that what they care about? Okay, well, let's explore those things, because I genuinely believe everybody cares. It's not about, oh, I don't care, so I'm not going to vote. It's like, have you been invited? Have you been invited to the table to offer your opinion about whether you care or not? And not everybody has, right? Not everybody has. So those conversations are sometimes painful, but they're always important.
Yeah, and it is, when you're out, especially stumping for your own, election, which like I did a couple of years ago, you do come across people who say, "Oh, I've never voted," and then it's up to you, or in your case, you're talking about yourself, going out and saying, "Why? Why are you not voting?" And here
what is it about, right? What is it about the process, that what fundamental right we have as a citizen of this country that you're not participating in? Like, where's the disconnect? Deb Haaland, the Honorable Deb Haaland, Congresswoman, we did a Zoom meeting together with several of us. And even being on the same Zoom call was kind of a cool thing, because I think quite highly of her. But she told a story, and I'll repeat it because I think it was moving to me. She talked about, when she was organizing and doing voter registration, and she was on the reservation, and it was like literally at the end of the day, it was the last house that she went to, and she walked in and, basically had a conversation with this family, and there was 7 members, even talking about it, I get chills. There was 7 members of that particular family that she registered to vote. And at the end of she was, leaving, basically, the elder in the home, the man said, I've always wanted to vote, but I always wanted to get registered to vote, but I never knew how. Yeah. And that strikes such a vulnerable chord within me, because I understand that feeling of not being part of something that many people take for granted.
Right.
And I hope I'm not stealing her story. I'm giving full credit, but it was such a beautiful, moving story that affected me greatly, because that's exactly what those conversations we should be having.
Right. Exactly. Because voter outreach is so important. It's not the idea that, that only the rich white men should be voting, but the idea that everybody should be voting, because
we're better.
Yeah.
Yeah, for participation, and right. We have a stronger democracy when more people participate.
Absolutely. And another thing that you pride yourself on, and that you find to be a very important aspect of your job, is actually customer service. And can you take a minute and talk about that?
Well, it's really important to me that our office continues to, to give my staff kudos. I can't do enough. They navigate spaces and people that every day that frankly are not always thrilled with them, or are not always nice to them. And they are able to do it in a way that is hopefully, everybody gets their needs met. Having said that, I think we can always do better, right? So when we have somebody that calls us because, or contacts us about their, spouse dying, and they want to be taken off of our voter roll, the first thing we should always do is to offer our condolences collectively from the clerk's office. Touches like that and things like that are really vital. That person may never ever contact our office again for any other reason, but I want them to know when they have and when they leave and they get off that phone call, if we can't help them, we will try our best, and we will let them know that we will try our best, right? So you calling me to tell me that, you know, an individual calling us to say, I need to remove somebody from the voter roll, it's not that easy. We have to have affirmation in an independent way. So I may not be able to give that person exactly what they want, but what I can do is tell them the steps that I will do to make sure that they get their needs met. And if their needs can't get met, I want to meet them with understanding and empathy. And I think that should be the rule and of customer service from our office. And I hope that that's something that we can move forward. The staff does a great job, and I never want to underestimate or I can't underscore enough how good of a job that they do, but we can always use more training. And when you have leadership that has that perspective and promotes that perspective and expects that, then that it catches on for sure.
Yeah, and that's so important, especially in this day and age when we see such an erosion of that to begin with. You know, just even going into maybe say the local McDonald's, not to, you know, not to single out anything in particular, but everybody goes to McDonald's. So let's just say it's a McDonald's, and not be greeted with smiles, and not be greeted with, you know, how can I help yous, and, you know, and people who don't look happy. And, you know, I think that when you're talking about creating customer service that is pleasant and has an appearance of happiness, can also lead to happiness among the people that work there, and also among the people who have having to interact with you. And I think that is something that's so missing in our world, that it's really a breath of fresh air to see happening.
Thank you. And I think that's, you know, we talk about, I value the employees that work at Dona County, not just in our office, but as a whole, but also creating an environment and a culture within our office where we appreciate each other and we're kind to each other. Because frankly, I often spend more time with people in my office than I do my own family members. So am I going to get on their nerves? Absolutely. Are we going to have days when we're just not feeling it? Course, right? This is a human process. But I want it to be a safe space in which people feel that they can, you know, reach out when they're not having a good day and say that to a colleague and be met with empathy and understanding and how can I help you today? I think that culture develops over time, but I think every day that I work in the clerk's office that I've seen how people have changed and shifted since I first started. It's been very rewarding, not just because those relationships are building, but because the expectation is that we're kind to each other. There's been environments, I've heard this, in which people have said, oh, so-and-so yelled at me at work. I have to tell you, I cannot imagine, and I know people deal with this every day, an environment in which a day-to-day that it's acceptable to yell or denigrate. I just don't understand that. So I think we have to really, that disbelief, we should all kind of feel that because it's not acceptable. And so that's kind of my perspective in terms of how customer service should start with employees and staff feeling valued. And I think once that starts, then the customer service comes.
Yeah, I think that is very astute. It probably comes from your psychology background. So we're at the very end here. So I would like to give you that last minute to give your stump speech, the one that just a minute to appeal directly to the voters, why they should be voting for you, and also if you could include your website.
Sure. So my name is Amanda López Askin, and I'm asking for your support as the Dona County Clerk. I've been in the role for a year and a half and successfully administered 3 elections, as well as done some administrative things that were a challenge, but important to get the job done. The county clerk's position has to be many things to many people. But at the end of the day, it's a $2 million organization that has vital importance to the running of our community, both the business and the running of democracy. So in that position, to be somebody that is able to be a great administrator and a great leader, as well as somebody who's not afraid to have, pull their sleeves up and do the hard work. I am a member of this community and have been for my entire life. I am deeply invested in my daughter's future here, your daughter's future here, and our community as a whole. And I hope that I get elected in order to continue the great work that the clerk's office has done in terms of our transparency and integrity. And the great thing about my job is that it is statute driven. The challenging thing about my job is it is a statute driven, but I commit to following those statutes in a way that is above board and transparent, and that anybody looking and wading through them knows that our office is run well and run with integrity. So I would appreciate your support. You can head to ALA, those are my initials, Amanda López Askin, ALA4FORNM.com for more information, get on my email list. You can also find my Facebook page where I've done a couple of town halls and talk more about myself and my ideas and how we can move democracy forward in Dona County. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure to spend this little bit of time talking.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you. We've been Facebook friends, which is, for a while. So it's nice to actually have an interaction with you. When this is all said and done and COVID moves away from us, who knows when that's going to happen. I travel frequently, so it'd be nice to grab lunch in Sapporo on my way north for sure.
Yeah, then that would be really an absolute pleasure as well. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you all of you for being here and watching this interview today. I urge you to go to Amanda's website and learn more about her. Check out her opponent. Make sure that you're voting for the correct person. And it's so important to vote. It's so important to vote in the primary, especially because in the primary you're selecting, as I tell you every time, you're selecting the person that is going to be representing you on the general election ballot. And then make sure you also vote in the general election. And I will also have her information below so that you can get to her website. And make sure that you click that button down there and subscribe so that you don't miss any of these interviews, these important interviews. And thank you everybody for being here. Thank you again, Amanda, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.